Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I have a topic today, and it's been brewing for a while. So I'm going to say it directly, and we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so unpacking it. Attachment styles. Specifically, the way attachment style talk has gone from being a really useful clinical framework to being one of the most weaponized vocabularies in modern relationship discourse. Here is what I keep seeing: posts, reels, videos. Everybody is identifying everyone else's attachment style. The ex is avoidant. The new partner is anxious. Your friend is disorganized. Your mom was fearful avoidant, which is why you're like this. And listen, there is a real and useful thing underneath all of this. Attachment theory is legitimate science. It has decades of research behind it, and it can genuinely help people understand their patterns. But what's happening online is not that. What's happening online is using a clinical framework to win arguments, to label people, to justify why someone left, to make yourself feel better about how a relationship ended. And as a clinician, and as someone who's watched this go from professional vocabulary to ammunition, I have some things to say about it. So buckle up, we're going to do this right. Part 1: What attachment theory actually is. Let's start with the real thing, because we can't talk about the misuse until we're clear on what the framework actually is. Attachment theory was developed in the 1950s by a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby. He was trying to understand something specific: why infants experience such severe distress when they're separated from their parents. Bowlby's big idea: infants are born with an innate biological drive to form attachments with their caregivers, not because the caregiver feeds them. The previous theory, which came from Freud, said babies attach to mothers because of feeding. Bowlby said no. Babies attach because attachment is a survival mechanism. The crying, the clinging, the following, those are not annoying behaviors. Those are evolutionary tools to keep a small, helpless human safe from danger. In the 1960s, a developmental psychologist named Mary Ainsworth built on Bowlby's work. She designed a famous study called The Strange Situation, where she watched what babies did when their mothers briefly left the room and how the babies behaved when the mothers came back. From that study, Ainsworth identified the original attachment categories: secure, anxious ambivalent, and avoidant. A fourth category, disorganized, was added later by researchers studying children from severely traumatic backgrounds. So that's the foundation: Bowlby, Ainsworth, babies, mothers, survival. Now, here's where it got bigger. Bowlby proposed that the way our earliest caregivers responded to us shaped what he called internal working models. These are mental frameworks, templates, built in the earliest childhood that shape how we view ourselves, how we view other people, and what we expect from relationships for the rest of our lives. In other words, the way your caregiver responded to your needs as a baby lays down the blueprint for how you'll expect intimate adults to respond to your needs decades later. Not because you're broken, because that's how brains work. They generalize from the data they have. The four broad styles, as they're commonly taught now, map roughly to this. Secure. You learn that your needs would be met. You expect that going forward. You can trust people. You can be intimate without losing yourself. You can also be alone without falling apart. Anxious. Sometimes called preoccupied. You learned that love was sometimes available and sometimes wasn't. So you became hypervigilant. You watch closely for signs of withdrawal. You crave reassurance. You panic when your person feels distant. Avoidant. Sometimes called dismissive. You learned that needing people was unsafe or unwelcome. So you got really good at not needing anyone. You value independence almost to a fault. You pull away when relationships get close. Disorganized, sometimes called fearful avoidant. You wanted closeness and it was dangerous. Often this comes from caregivers who were both a source of comfort and a source of harm. So you live in a push pull. You want the thing, you're terrified of the thing, you can't settle on either. That is the framework. In broad strokes, it's real, it's useful, it explains a lot. And now I'm going to tell you something that almost no one on social media is going to tell you about this framework, that I think changes how you should listen to all of it. Part 2, the bombshell they're not telling you. Here's the bombshell. Most modern attachment researchers don't really use the 4 categories anymore. Let me say that again because I know it's not what you've been hearing. The people who actually study this for a living, the researchers, the PhDs, the folks writing the journal articles, have largely moved away from the idea that there are 4 discrete buckets of human attachment. In 2015, a researcher named Chris Fraley and his colleagues published a major study looking at whether attachment styles are best described as 4 categories or as something else. They ran the data through a fancy analysis called taxometric analysis, which is designed to detect whether something is genuinely categorical, like blood type, or actually continuous, like height. The result? Attachment is dimensional, not categorical, meaning it's like height, not like blood type. Here's what that means in plain language. There are not 4 kinds of people. There are 2 continuous dimensions on which everyone falls somewhere. Dimension 1, attachment-related anxiety. How much do you worry about being abandoned, rejected, or not loved enough? Dimension 2, attachment-related avoidance. How uncomfortable are you with closeness, dependency, and emotional intimacy? Everyone is somewhere on those 2 dials. You might be low anxiety, low avoidance. That's roughly what we use to call secure. You might be high anxiety, low avoidance. That's roughly what we used to call anxious. You might be low anxiety, high avoidance. That's roughly avoidant. You might be high on both, and that's roughly disorganized. But here's the thing. The 4 labels are prototypes, useful shorthands for combinations of 2 dials. They are not identities. They are not who you are. They're descriptions of where you currently sit. And the gold standard measure researchers use to assess this is called the ECR-R. The Experiences and Close Relationships Revised. It gives you 2 scores or 2 continuous dimensions, not 1 label out of 4. Do you see how different that is from what's happening online? Online, attachment style has become an identity. People say, I am anxious attached, like it's their blood type, like it's part of who they are, like it explains why they did the thing they did. Research says you have some level of attachment anxiety and some level of attachment avoidance, and those numbers move based on your relationships, your therapy, your life experiences, and even who you're currently dating. They are not fixed. They are not your name. This is the first big problem with how attachment style talk shows up on the internet. People are using a category system the researchers themselves have mostly abandoned. And then they're using that out-of-date category system to draw conclusions the science doesn't actually support. So when you hear someone say, I'm just anxious attached, or my ex was avoidant, what they actually mean, if we're being accurate to the science, is that they currently score in a particular range on 2 continuous dimensions, which can change and which describe their patterns, not their souls. That doesn't quite have the same punch as a 1-word identity label, does it? That's part of why the simplified version caught on. The simplified version is more shareable and easier to weaponize. Part 3. How attachment talk got weaponized. Okay, Now that we know what the framework actually is, let me walk you through what's happening with it online and in our daily relationships and in our group chats. Because the misuse has shape, there are specific patterns, and I want to name them. Pattern 1, the diagnostic label as an insult. This is the big one. You'll recognize it instantly. Someone has a falling out with another person, a breakup, a friendship ending, a family argument, and in describing what happened, they reach for attachment vocabulary. He's avoidant. She's anxious. They're disorganized. And what they mean, even if they don't admit it, is the problem was them. They had something wrong with them, and that's why this ended. Listen, I'm a clinician, and as so, I want to say something carefully here. You can have a genuine read on someone's attachment patterns. You can notice that an ex was uncomfortable with intimacy, or that a friend struggled with abandonment fears. These are real observations. They can be accurate. But there's a difference between noticing a pattern and labeling a person with a clinical category to justify why the relationship ended. Noticing a pattern says, I think this person struggles with closeness, and that contributed to what happened between us. That's fair. That's reflective. Labeling says, he's avoidant, which is why he left me. End of story. That is not psychology. That is a wound dressed up in clinical language. And the labels almost always conveniently absolve the labeler. Notice that. Have you ever heard someone say, he's avoidant and I also pushed him in ways that weren't fair, and I had my own anxious behaviors that contributed? Almost never. The label is almost always one directional. The other person is the diagnosed party. The labeler is the reasonable narrator. That's not analysis. That's a power move. Pattern 2, the public diagnosis. This is when people don't just think someone has a particular attachment style. They post about it. They tell their friend group. They make TikToks describing the behavior of someone who isn't there to defend themselves. And I want to say this directly. It is inappropriate to publicly label someone with a clinical category they may or may not actually have. You are not their clinician. You don't have the training. You don't have the assessment tools. You don't have the full picture of their life. You have your experience of them, which is partial by definition. And even if you did have the training, diagnosing someone publicly without their consent while they aren't in the room is not something a competent professional would do. It violates basic clinical ethics. It would get a licensed clinician in serious trouble. So when a random influencer on TikTok diagnoses an entire category of people, quote, here's how to spot an avoidant, they are doing something even trained clinicians are not allowed to do. That doesn't make it more credible. It makes it less. Pattern 3, the framework as identity. This is the one I was talking about in the last segment. The shift from I have some attachment patterns to I am anxious attachment. And here's why this matters. Because the moment you make a pattern your identity, you stop being able to change it. If anxious attachment is who you are, why would you work on it? Working on it would mean becoming someone else, and nobody wants to become someone else. But if anxious attachment is a set of patterns you currently have, things you do, reactions you have, default settings of your nervous system, then those things can be examined, adjusted, outgrown. The identity framing locks you in place. The pattern framing sets you free. The way social media talks about this locks people in place. Pattern 4, using attachment talk to justify staying stuck. This one is sneaky. Watch for it in yourself. It sounds like, I can't help being clingy. I'm anxious attached. Or I can't help withdrawing. I'm avoidant. Or I can't help the chaos in this relationship. I'm fearful avoidant. Notice what those sentences are doing. They're using a clinical category to explain why a behavior cannot or will not change. Research says attachment styles can change substantially across the lifespan through therapy, through relationships, through life experience, through self awareness. We'll get to all that in a few minutes. But if you're using your attachment style as a shield against having to change, you're using a framework that's supposed to free you to keep yourself trapped. Pattern 5, the weaponized accusation. And finally, the big one, using attachment style as a way to win arguments. You are disagreeing with your partner about something, and in the middle of the disagreement, they say, "This is your anxious attachment showing," or "You're being avoidant right now." Now your concern, whatever it was, has been reframed as a symptom of your pathology rather than a legitimate thing to discuss. They didn't address what you said. They diagnosed you for saying it. That is gaslighting and clinical clothing. And it is one of the most insidious things attachment style discourse has produced. Because how do you respond to that? If you push back, you're proving them right. If you don't push back, you're letting them off the hook. There's no good move. The accusation itself is the trap. And if you find yourself doing this to a partner, to a friend, to a family member, I'm asking you, gently but firmly, to stop. You're not psychoanalyzing them. You're dismissing them. And there's a real difference between those two things. Part 4, why people reach for this. Okay, I need to pump the brakes for a minute because I've been sharp for a while and I want to be fair before I go any further. People are not reaching for attachment vocabulary because they're bad people. They're reaching for it because it offers something that is genuinely hard to find elsewhere. Reason 1, it offers explanation in a confusing emotional landscape. A relationship ends, you're devastated, you don't know why it happened, you can't sleep, you're going in circles, and then you find a framework that says, here's why he did that. Here's the category of person she was. Here's why this was always going to end this way. That feels like relief. After hours of not understanding, suddenly there's a clean explanation. Of course people want that. Of course they grab it. Reason 2, it feels like validation. If your ex was avoidant, then the way you felt was real. They really did pull away. They really were emotionally unavailable. You weren't making it up. You weren't being too much. There was a thing. That validation is precious, especially if you're someone who was previously told your perceptions weren't accurate. Attachment style language gives you a clinical sounding stamp of approval on your own experience. Reason 3, the mental health field finally became accessible. For decades, clinical psychology was locked away in therapists' offices and academic journals. Most people had no access to this vocabulary at all. Now it's everywhere. Anyone can read about it. Anyone can apply it. That's, in many ways, good. The democratization of psychological language has helped enormous numbers of people get curious about their own patterns, seek help, understand things about themselves that previous generations died without ever understanding. Reason 4, it promises a kind of healing. If your problem has a name, maybe it has a solution. Maybe you can read 3 books and listen to 10 podcasts and follow 5 experts and figure this out. Maybe you can master it. That promise is powerful. Whether or not it's accurate, it's powerful. So I want to say this clearly. I'm not telling you to stop being interested in attachment theory. I'm not telling you the framework is bunk. I'm not telling you to stop reading about it or learning about it or applying it to your own life. I'm telling you to apply it to your own life, not someone else's, and to hold it gently as one framework among several, not as a final verdict on who you or anyone else is. Part 5, for the one who got labeled. I want to take a moment here and speak directly to a particular person who might be listening. You, the one who got labeled. Maybe your ex told a story about you after the breakup that involved a clinical word. He told his friends you were anxious attached. She told her friends you were avoidant. Someone in your life decided what category you belonged to, and then offered that category as the reason things didn't work between you. And maybe you've been carrying that diagnosis around, wondering if it's true, wondering if it explains things, wondering if you were a particular kind of broken. I want to tell you something. You probably are not what they said you are. And even if there's a kernel of truth in their read, even if you do have some patterns in the direction they described, you are not those patterns. You are a whole human being with a whole life and a whole inner world. And the moment they reduce you to a clinical category, they stopped seeing the rest of you. Listen, there's something I want you to hear, and I'm going to say it plainly, even though it might land hard. Sometimes a person leaves because they just don't want to be with you, not because you're anxious attached, not because they're avoidant, not because of attachment styles at all. Sometimes a person leaves because they don't want this anymore, because they want someone different, because the relationship ran its course, because they weren't ready and you weren't, or you were ready and they weren't, or there was no shared future to be found. And we don't like that explanation because it doesn't make sense of anything. It doesn't give us a category. It doesn't tell us who to be next time. So we reach for attachment vocabulary instead. We say, he was avoidant. That's why he left. She was anxious. That's why I had to leave. We give the painful, plotless event a plot. But sometimes there is no plot. Sometimes there's just 2 people who didn't end up together for reasons that aren't clinical, that aren't pathological, that aren't anybody's diagnosable problem. And if you've been told you are a particular attachment style, and you've been told that's why someone left, maybe it's not. Maybe they just left. And maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just somebody who was loved by someone who eventually wasn't going to love you anymore. That happens to good people with ordinary patterns all the time. You are allowed to set the diagnosis down. They are allowed to have just been someone who didn't want to stay. Both can be true. Part 6, Earned Security, the part that matters most. Now I want to give you the part of the research the internet doesn't talk about enough, because it's not as flashy as the diagnostic content, but it's the thing that actually matters. Attachment styles change. Let me say that again because it directly contradicts most of what you've been hearing online. Attachment styles change. The research is solid on this. Roughly 25 to 30% of people experience meaningful changes in their attachment style across their lifetime. That's not a tiny number. That's a substantial chunk of the population moving in one direction or another. And most of the time, the direction is from insecure towards secure. There's a name for this in the research: earned security or earned secure attachment. Earned security is when somebody who started life with an insecure attachment style develops a more secure attachment style over time. Through specific experiences and specific work, they didn't get it from their childhood, they built it later, with effort, And here's what's beautiful about earned security in the research: roughly one third of adults who get classified as securely attached did not have great childhoods. They got there through their own work as adults, not because their parents nailed it, because they did. So, how does it happen? What does the research say actually produces this change? Number one, healthy relationships with secure people. If you spend significant time in relationships with people who themselves have a secure attachment style, friends, partners, mentors, therapists, their security becomes contagious. Slowly, your nervous system learns in real time that intimacy can be safe, that conflict can be repaired, that needs can be expressed without catastrophe. Your nervous system can't be argued into security. It has to be shown security repeatedly, over time, by actual humans behaving securely with you. Number two, therapy that's attachment informed. Therapy is one of the most powerful tools for moving toward earned security, especially therapy with someone who understands attachment theory and can help you make sense of your own patterns without telling you they're permanent, without giving you a label and walking away. A good therapist won't just identify your attachment style, they'll help you understand where it came from, why it makes sense, and how to gradually build new responses that don't override the old wiring by coexisting with it more peacefully. Number three, making sense of your story. This is one of the most interesting findings in the research. The biggest predictor of whether someone moves from insecure to secure attachment is whether they can tell a coherent story about their own childhood. People who can sit with their history, acknowledge what was hard, acknowledge what was good, without minimizing it and without being overwhelmed by it, tend to develop earned security at a much higher rate than people who either dismiss their past or are still consumed by it. The work is integration, not denial, not obsession, honest, organized understanding of where you came from and how it shaped you. Number four, emotional regulation skills. Boring but true, learning to manage your nervous system, to recognize when you're activated, to use grounding techniques, to not act on every spike of feeling, slowly retains the system to settle down and trust that it can handle the things it used to need to defend against. This is slow work. It is not glamorous. There is no podcast that can do it for you. There is no Instagram infographic that can shortcut it. It is hours and years of practice, and it works. Number five, becoming a securely attached person to someone else. Some of the most powerful research suggests that the act of providing secure attachment to someone else, a child, a partner, a friend, can shift your own attachment patterns dramatically. Sometimes you become more secure by giving secure love to someone else, even when you didn't get it yourself. Sometimes the way to learn how to receive it is to learn how to give it. So, if you've been told you're avoidant or anxious or disorganized, and you've taken that as a sentence, hear this. It is not a sentence. It is a starting point. The science is on your side. 25 to 30% of people change this across a lifetime. That could be you. There's no biological law that says you have to die as the same attachment style you came in with. That's not motivational fluff. That's the research. 7. How to actually use this framework. Let me give you a few quick rules for how to engage with attachment theory in a way that helps you rather than hurting you or hurting other people. Rule 1. Use it on yourself first, last, and maybe only. The framework is most useful as a self-reflection tool, not a labeling tool. If you read about attachment styles and notice things in yourself, great. Bring it to therapy, notice your patterns, adjust them. If you read about attachment styles and immediately start diagnosing your ex, your boss, your mother, and 3 random people on TikTok, you're using it wrong. Bring it back to yourself. Rule 2: take the test in private and read the results gently. If you want to know roughly where you sit, the gold standard measure used in research is called the ECR-R, the Experiences and Close Relationships Revised. It's free to find online if you search for it. It'll give you scores on the 2 continuous dimensions: attachment anxiety, attachment avoidance. Look at where you are. Notice. Don't make it your name. There are also reputable resources online that can give you general information. Be skeptical of anything that promises to fix your whole life in 3 steps, and be very skeptical of anything that's primarily trying to sell you a course. Rule 3: stop publicly diagnosing people, including your ex. Even if you're right, it's not your job. It doesn't help anyone. It just spreads the labeling, and it lets you off the hook for examining your own contribution to what happened. Rule 4: notice when someone is using attachment talk to dismiss you. If you're trying to talk to someone and they keep responding with a diagnostic label, that's not engagement, that's avoidance. You're allowed to say, "I'm not going to talk to you about my attachment style right now. I'm going to talk to you about what just happened. Can we focus on what just happened?" Rule 5: hold the framework with humility. Attachment theory is one really useful lens. It is not the only lens. People are more than their attachment patterns, and the framework, even when applied correctly, only explains a portion of what's happening in any given relationship. Use it like a flashlight, not a microscope, not a magnifying glass on someone else's character. A flashlight to help you see in dim conditions the contours of what you're walking through. Closing. Let me bring this home. Attachment theory is a real, useful, decades-old framework developed by serious researchers, refined over time, with genuine application to how we understand ourselves and our relationships. And it has been one of the casualties of social media's habit of turning everything clinical into ammunition. So here's what I want to leave you with. Number 1, I promise you, every person has an attachment style. Even you, even me, even the most evolved looking person you follow online. We all have patterns from how we were loved as children. None of us escapes it. We just escape it in different ways and to different degrees. Number 2, your attachment style is not your identity. It is a pattern. It is 2 scores on 2 dials. It is something that describes how you currently respond to closeness, not who you are at the bottom. Number 3, stop diagnosing other people with it. Use it on yourself. Bring it to your therapist. Read books about it. Take the ECR-R. Notice your patterns. Adjust your behaviors. But please, stop using it as a weapon against people who can't defend themselves against your clinical reframing of why they hurt you. Number 4, if you've been labeled or diagnosed or pathologized by someone who didn't have the right to do that, you are allowed to set their verdict down. It probably wasn't accurate. And even if it had a kernel of truth, it wasn't the whole truth. You are bigger than the category they assigned you. Number 5, and this is the one I want you to take with you the most. Sometimes people leave because they just don't want to be with you. Not because they have an attachment style that makes relationships difficult. Sometimes there's no diagnosis to be found, just 2 people who didn't end up together. And the absence of a clinical explanation does not mean you are unloved or unworthy of love. It just means the story didn't have a tidy ending. Most stories don't. You can be a whole person without a diagnosis attached to you. You can heal without a label. You can grow without naming yourself. You can become more securely attached without ever using the word attachment again in your life. The framework is a tool. You are the human being. Don't let the tool start running your life. So, thanks for hanging out with me today. This one took a while to put together because I wanted to get the clinical stuff right. If anything in here was useful, send it to someone who needs to hear it, including possibly yourself. Take care of yourselves, and when you can, take care of each other.